from West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Support for the Legislature Today is provided by the following.
The West Virginia Higher Education Policy Commission, working with students and families to improve college access and student success for a better West Virginia.
Good evening. I'm Andrea Lanham at the Capitol, and this is the Legislature Today. Many highly watched bills are seeing action this week. The Senate unanimously passed the Community and Technical College bill today. The governor has signed a bill eliminating the West Virginia film tax credit, and angry public education employees have announced a rally here at the Capitol February 17th. We'll get into more news later in the program, but first, a proposed intermediate court of appeals is being debated this week in Senate Judiciary. Chairman Charles Trump of Morgan County joins us now. Senator, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Andrea. It's a pleasure to be here.
So let's talk about Senate Bill 341. First off, can you just describe what an intermediate court of appeals is and what it does?
Sure. An intermediate appellate court would be a court that reviews decisions and actions of lower courts that hierarchically is beneath the Supreme Court.
Okay, so what kind of cases would be heard here?
That's a great question, and it is one of the subjects that we're grappling with in the Judiciary Committee right now. Our state constitution and the Judicial Reform Amendment that was passed in 1974 authorizes the legislature to create an intermediate court of appeals. It doesn't specify what sort of cases it would hear or decide, and so we're working on crafting that right now and making those decisions in the Judiciary Committee as we work the bill.
And you just came from the Judiciary Committee. Can you tell me a little bit about what's going on with the debate?
Well, what's going on right now is we're gathering information, and this is sometimes a long process, but this is a very important question, and we want to make decisions that are sound based on good information, good data. So what we're doing right now is examining versions of the bill, hearing from speakers, people who have opinions for and against the legislation, ideas on ways that it might be improved, with the object being to craft what will be the best bill possible when we start to work it with amendments and report a good bill to the floor of the Senate.
So why is this necessary?
The proponents of the bill believe that it would allow a broader development of decisional law in West Virginia. Right now, the Supreme Court of Appeals is the highest court in our judiciary. That would remain the case. But they are really the only appellate court. And so they, under current law and the way the judicial system is structured, they have to decide all the appeals from all the cases from all the courts of West Virginia, essentially.
Now, opponents say that this is an unnecessary layer of the court system and that the Supreme Court already hears all the cases and will at the very least issue a memorandum decision. What's your response to that?
And I've heard that. We've heard that in committee, and I suspect the people who are opposed to the creation of this court will continue to make that argument. Our Supreme Court, by caseload, is very busy, and there are those who believe that if we had an intermediate appellate court to handle some of the work and ultimately to have it reviewed by the Supreme Court, that it would allow for the broader development of case law in West Virginia.
Let's listen to one of the opponents of this bill, a member of your Judiciary Committee, Senator Mike Romano, who was speaking with a staff attorney in the Judiciary meeting yesterday.
Evidently there's some indecision because we've gone from appointed. I think it started out we were going to use retired senior status circuit judges, then we went to appointed, then we went to elected, now we're back to appointed. What's the concern there? I mean, it would seem to me that nonpartisan elections of all judges is the public policy of this state is set forth in its constitution. Why do we want to change that?
That again is a policy question. I think the general argument for appointment of judges, just as a very general basis, is they are less susceptible to political influence because judges have to make tough decisions sometimes. For example, this is on the macro level, and I think the argument for having judges be elective is then they will be susceptible to political influences. So that's just a policy question, and there are pros and cons to each.
You don't think there's political pressure when you're appointed by a governor?
I'm sure there is, but
Yeah.
that is the argument that I have learned.
I guess the political pressure of the citizens is different than the political pressure from a governor. So I personally would rather have the political pressure of citizens.
Senator, does Senator Romano make a good point about elected versus appointed judges?
Well, his point is this: it's going to be up to the Senate, and maybe ultimately the House of Delegates, to decide that question initially. The Constitution requires that the members of our Supreme Court are elected to 12-year terms, and the Constitution requires that the members, the circuit court judges throughout the state, be elected to 8-year terms. But the Constitution imposes no such similar restriction or requirement as to the Intermediate Court of Appeals that it authorizes the legislature to create. And so really, Andrea, what we have is essentially a blank slate. And I understand that clearly from his question, Senator Romano has a strong preference for the installation of judges by popular election, and that may win the day. I don't know. It'll be a question that'll be decided, at least initially, in the legislation that we pass, if we pass it.
Our Supreme Court isn't in favor of this, are they?
You know, we had a representative of the Supreme Court before our committee just within the last hour, and I asked that very question of him. And his response was that the Supreme Court had not, as of yet, taken a position on this bill.
So how many judges would be on this Intermediate Court of Appeals?
In the current iteration of the legislation that we're examining and working on, 6. We would divide the state into 2 circuits, 2 divisions, a north and a south, and there would be 3 intermediate court appellate judges, a panel of 3 in each of 2 districts.
So why would there be 6 judges?
Well, you're generally going to seek to have an odd number on a panel so that you don't end up in tie votes on decisions. We have 5 on our Supreme Court and seldom have a chance of a tie in that, so you need an odd number. We thought 3 judges, a panel of 3 judges in each of 2 districts or divisions.
And the bill calls for 10-year terms. That seems like a long time.
It's right in the middle of the terms that exist for circuit court judges under our Constitution, which are 8. They're elected to 8-year terms. And our Supreme Court justices now, under the Constitution, are elected to 12-year terms. 10 is right in the middle.
And you talked about the districts that they would be divided into. So it's divided into north and south for this proposed system. Can you explain to me the rationale behind dividing it that way?
As opposed to east and west, or
just dividing it that way in general?
Yeah, the idea, one of the ideas behind the Intermediate Appellate Court is to have appeals from circuit courts and family courts in the cases that are assigned to an Intermediate Appellate Court heard initially within the districts to make it more convenient for litigants and practitioners. Right now, everybody has to come to Charleston. So if you're at the top of Hancock County or at the bottom of Welch or far over in Jefferson County, the appellate arguments, the cases are all heard in Charleston. In this version that we're working on, the Intermediate Court of Appeals in each district would sit in various places throughout the district and hear arguments in a way that would be more convenient to the litigants and presumably less expensive for that reason.
And I'm glad you brought up cost too. How much is this expected to cost?
We've requested a fiscal note. I'll be less than candid, and I don't want to be that. I will tell you it's going to cost some money. I don't know an exact number yet. Senator Romano, whom we heard from a moment ago, was doing some math in the committee room the other day, and I think he's probably pretty close. I think we're probably talking $2 or $3 million in that range.
And where would that money come from?
It would have to come from the state's budget, as all general revenue budget, as all appropriations must.
Do we have the money in the general revenue and that budget to implement this?
That is a question that is in the balance, and it's a fair question, and I'm not insensitive to the concerns that have been expressed about the cost. And so, like anything else, it is an exercise in balancing the projected benefits of anything the state government does against the cost, and all of that in the context of all the things that the state must do and fund as we construct a budget for the state each year.
Now we only have about a minute left, so I wanted to get your final thoughts on this. Do you think that this is going to pass this session? This isn't a new concept by any
Andrea, that's
means.
that's always the hardest question, and I always demur. I am loath to try to predict passage or defeat of legislation because I'm wrong as often as I am right. I will tell you this: there is interest in it. And there is opposition to it. And more than that, I don't have the crystal ball to tell you where it will be at the end of the day.
Well, Senator, thank you so much for joining me this evening.
Andre, my pleasure.
Next, a promising effort in economic diversification. Thousands of miles of stream throughout Appalachia run bright orange with pollution called acid mine drainage. But if researchers at West Virginia University have their way, this and other coal waste could produce valuable products called rare earth elements. Those elements are essential in many high-tech products. Glennis Ford reports.
In Appalachia, we've got a lot of coal mines. Some of them are being retired, but in any event, all of them require remediation and they create waste. And I'm talking about a lot of waste. Question is, can this waste be worth something?
Paul Zimkevich is standing in front of a silo full of crushed limestone that slowly gets flushed into a stream pouring out of an old coal mine here. It's a state-of-the-art, state-operated facility that treats acid mine drainage. If it weren't here, the stream would run rusty red, killing ecosystems in its path.
So we're at the Omega Mine, and the Omega Mine is about 4.5 miles south of Morgantown, West Virginia. And it's an area that's been heavily mined for coal since the Civil War.
This year, Zimkevich, the director of the West Virginia Water Research Institute at West Virginia University, was awarded $2.6 million federal dollars plus funds from the private sector. His research aims to locate, isolate, and commercialize select hard-to-gather elements of the periodic table, elements that are critical to the technology age we live in. Some of those elements can be found in acid mine drainage.
I finished up some calculations that the acid mine drainage production in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Eastern Ohio can supply anywhere between, and this is in terms of rare earths, somewhere between 800 tons per year to maybe 2,200 tons per year. Now, 800 tons a year is basically what the military needs.
Zimkevich and a handful of other scientists in and around the Ohio Valley make up the majority of the American team dedicated to cracking the rare earth element puzzle. That is, the team that's on the hunt for rare earth elements and how to build an industry around them. The Americans are the underdogs. Right now, China is the team to beat, where 95% of the rare earths used in phones, electric cars, and smart bombs are all sourced.
In 2011, the prices of rare earth elements spiked, in part because of a supply problem from China. And so that instilled an interest in researching other sources of rare earth elements throughout the world, but also in the United States.
Tom Tarka is the technical project lead for rare earth elements at the National Energy and Technology Laboratory in West Virginia. He explains about 140,000 tons of rare earth elements are processed globally each year into products on the market. So far, there's no commercially viable alternative for sourcing these elements outside of China, since the U.S. doesn't want to have to rely on any single other nation to provide important components critical to national security. Government funds are funneling into research at the National Lab in Morgantown, which largely focuses on coal and fossil fuel research. Marianne Alvin is the head of the Rare Earths Division there.
Right now what we have is actively 15 programs, 15 projects that are investigating not only separations, investigating where we can find our best reserves, and how can we take this forward.
Rare earth mines have tried and failed in the U.S. already. They just weren't profitable on their own. The hope now is that rare earth mining can be economically viable if it piggybacks on other mining operations, like coal. Researchers have already begun to identify rare earth elements in and around coal seams, as well as those within waste products associated with mining and burning coal.
Turns out that in Appalachian coals, especially southern West Virginia and central App, we're seeing more heavy rare earth elements. And that's good because these heavy rare earth elements they're rarer and they have an increased value as a result.
So it turns out rare earths are not actually rare so much as rarely concentrated. They are hard to extract. It usually takes acids and harsh chemical processes, which creates the stuff of environmental nightmares. West Virginia is already coping with environmental nightmares.
Before the Clean Water Act, the Monongahela River at Morgantown was orange and it had a pH of about 4.2. It was absolutely dead. The only difference between then and now is the amount of treatment that water gets before it winds up in the river. So the Clean Water Act required companies to treat a lot of that acid mine drainage. And right now in the Mon River Basin, I think something like a third of all the acid mine drainage is actually being treated in industrial size operations.
So acids are literally seeping from coal mines everywhere throughout Appalachia and apparently leaching rare earth elements in the process.
It turns out that the more acid seams give us the best results because it has the most pyrite. Pyrite in turn generates the acid that leaches the rare earth side of the rock.
Simkevich's research is not only identifying which elements exist in acid mine drainage and the sludge left from treatment of polluted water, but also how to process the elements and get them into marketable form.
Rather than sludge disposal being a liability, if you could actually make some money on it, and it's probably not going to pay for all of the costs of AMD treatment, but even if it knocks down the cost by 20, 30, 40%, that's a very, very significant incentive to continue treating acid mine drainage.
And Simkevich is just one researcher. Others in Kentucky and Pennsylvania are studying lots of other coal waste products. Scientists estimate that with continued research, a rare earths industry is 10 to 20 years down the road. For the Legislature Today, industry is 10 to 20 years down the road.
Tonight in our I'd Like to Know segment, we hear from a Braxton County viewer who has questions about mineral rights and owners' rights as legislators consider several oil and gas industry related bills. Senator David Seipold of Preston County responds.
My name is Justin Raines. I'm from Braxton County, and I would like to ask the legislature what their plans are to protect West Virginians from the bills that we've seen in the past few years, such as force pooling, lease integration, and co-tenancy, which are aimed at stealing the land and property rights of local West Virginia citizens and giving them to out-of-state and now foreign entities in regards to shale gas development.
I am certain that there will be at least one, if not more, bills presented to the legislature this year which will deal with those three issues: lease integration, co-tenancy, and also joint development. I will also say that in the last 3 years, I have not found any one of our bills which I felt comfortable supporting, and I have been opposed to all of them. I don't know how they will be crafted this year. Last year, in the 2017 session, the bill was passed by the Senate and sent to the House, where it did not pass. I think that this year, the House of Delegates will probably have the first shot, and they'll send it back over to the Senate. Now, I've always been concerned about personal rights and specifically real estate or land rights. And we want to make sure that any bills that are passed are fair and balanced and provide for the responsible development of minerals and proper compensation of mineral owners and surface owners.
We'd like to hear from more of you. Post your video questions to West Virginia Public Broadcasting's Facebook or Twitter page with the hashtag WVI'dLikeToKnow, or send an email to wvidliketoknow@wvpublic.org. Senior reporter Dave Schatz joins me now for an update on what's going on today. Dave, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
So first off, what can you tell me about co-tenancy? I know that that's been discussed this week.
Right. Well, that bill was held over in the House Energy Committee last week. This week, just today, it came through that committee. There was a committee amendment that passed, and so that bill moves on to House Judiciary. So we'll see where that goes. It's kind of early on for that bill, but we've got our eyes on it. I looked up that committee amendment earlier. It hadn't hit the system, so I'll be taking a look at that later on this week.
So what does that bill do?
That bill deals with landowner rights for the upcoming natural gas boom, that's been going on. Right now, it says that if 75% of a group of landowners that want to do drilling on that particular piece of property, they can go ahead and do it and force the other tenants on that piece of property to go ahead and drilling. And in the bill, it does ensure that the royalties received would go to those that didn't initially agree to the drilling.
So let's talk about the Community and Technical College bill that passed today in the Senate unanimously.
Right. A lot of senators got up and spoke about that bill. Everyone from Craig Blair to Senator Romano. Senate Education Chair Kenny Mann referred to it as a moon landing sort of moment. All the senators praised it. There was a lot of celebration there in the Senate today. And we have a clip of that, so if we could go ahead right now and take a look at it, we'll see what some of the senators
Education
said.
Committee moving the age down to 18 was a major change, because it takes the children who we were going to lose between 18 and 20 and gives them a pathway to success. I remember President Bush's No Child Left Behind. By changing this age and what this has done, we truly will leave no child behind in West Virginia, because every one of them will get the opportunity to have a good career and make a good life for their families. And I thank you, Mr. President.
I've dreamed about this since I was a farmer riding a tractor, 21 years old in Berkeley County growing apples and peaches. Because when I was in school in 1976 and 77, they really wanted to push you to college education. You got to go to a four-year. It didn't fit for me, and it doesn't fit for a lot of us. But we can still be very, very, very productive. And I've got to add one last thing to this. When you put people into the workforce, it takes them off the entitlement rolls. That in itself pays dividends and also attracts business.
So one thing I know you've been covering is House Bill 4010. Tell me a little bit about that.
Right. That bill provides no requirement for a pastor to perform a marriage due to his sincerely held beliefs. I spoke to Andrew Snyder of Fairness West Virginia. He told me that their organization is neutral on this bill. There was a little bit of debate in the House, and we'll take a look at that right now.
Well, thank you. I believe the gentleman stated we need to stick to the purpose of the bill. And I believe that the purpose of this bill is because some people perceive the need to pander to what they perceive as an intolerant element in their own base. And I like to give West Virginians a little more credit than that. I think we need to go out and talk to the people we represent. I don't think that they really feel the need to that. Nobody came to me with this problem. No pastor, priest, or rabbi, any member of a religious organization has ever come to me with this problem, because the problem doesn't exist.
Given the way things are going in the world these days, even though we haven't had this tested, the time that it's going to happen is not that far removed, possibly, and I think it's a good bill because it just basically states that the First Amendment, as the gentleman from the 37th said, so I am in support of this bill.
Our Constitution seems to be clear. I have no doubt about that. But I introduced my pastor up here in the gallery a little bit earlier, and he and I have had a couple conversations with regard to this issue and concerns that he may have, and steps that our church and others have taken to help secure his freedom to make those choices. I see this as one more step to help my pastor and other pastors to be able to follow their religious convictions. I see no reason not to vote for this bill.
Now, the Senate today also held over the teacher and state employees pay raise bill. Talk a little bit about that.
And Governor Justice clarified in a release, I believe, that this does include not just teacher salaries, but all state employees. That bill's held over. That was on second reading today. Obviously, maybe we might actually see some amendments to that. Who knows yet? That'll be on second reading again tomorrow. So.
And finally, we had the bill to dismantle the education and arts. I know this is something you've been following.
Right. It's today there was a motion to postpone that bill indefinitely. That motion failed. It does advance to third reading, so it will be up for a vote tomorrow as of now. So if it hits House calendar, they'll be voting on it. So.
Dave Mistich, senior reporter, thank you so much for joining me this evening.
Thanks.
That's it for the legislature today. Join us tomorrow night when we'll hear from Senator Mike Romano, who will discuss his opposition to the Intermediate Court of Appeals bill. Also tomorrow, we'll talk with the Commissioner of Tourism about several bills this session impacting her division. And we'll have another story featuring an economic diversification effort, this one featuring an agribusiness program. That's all tomorrow on the Legislature Today. I'm Andrea Lanham for West Virginia Public Broadcasting. Thanks for joining us and have a great evening.